Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Tuesday, September 21st, and it looks like just an inside day today. I called this a range day. Um, we traded within pretty much within the overnight highs and lows. There was definitely a downward bias to the day. We closed really down here in the end, although we rallied rather strongly for a bit. It ends up almost closing on the low. So it's definitely a downward day, and there was definitely a downward bias most of the day. We'll go over and look at the regular, the 2000 tick chart here momentarily, but I just wanted to give you another look at this. We clearly got a couple of legs down. We did break higher slightly here. So if you measure these, say we started, that was the high right there. If you measure down, and then that was the high right there. So we pretty much well overshot our measured leg there, bunch. We even broke outside the brown band here, which is extremely oversold. Um, I still expect we're going to bounce out of here at some point, even if only momentarily. Just like today, uh, you felt it was pretty obvious that we'd probably try to rally out of there today. I thought we'd probably succeed at going higher and coming back up and at least testing these lows, maybe the midline, which is this purple in the middle here. But this market's still pretty bearish. This thing could roll over and we could turn down. We just got to see what happens. My guess is we'll rally here for a day or so soon. Not sure when that's coming yet. Um, but clearly it looks like two legs down and much more than a measured move. So I really think we're way oversold here. We're still inside that purple and brown band, which generally means you're going to bounce soon. I mean, even in this strong downtrend, when we got up in those bands, you can see it wasn't long before we'd have a correction. So I would expect a correction's coming soon. Uh, doesn't mean it's coming tomorrow. We may push down and test this low again before we go higher. We'll just have to see. So generally they'll bounce out of here pretty quick. So as big as that sell-off was, I really thought we'd probably end a little more positively today, even if we ended as an inside day, but it didn't happen. So we will just have to see what tomorrow brings. But we could just kind of go sideways here for a bit. But this is definitely, this looks like the start of rejection, but this sure doesn't look like rejection off the lows. This looks like rejection off the upper upper side of this original downtrend bar here to me. So, but let's go over to the 2000 tick chart. Okay, here we are. Here's our 2000 tick chart, and there's a couple of ways to look at it. This is really a range day. You can see that we're mostly working sideways, but there's a strong downward bias here. We did have this correction in the middle here, but for the most part, it's downtrend, and there does appear to be this tan channel appears to be valid, although when we came up to confirm it, we really broke, and then you see there's two legs to a new low, and we did end up closing slightly outside the overnight highs and lows. So there's still that downward bias, and you can still see the inside somewhat mostly sideways action here. That's just kind of up and down, but it's more down than it is up. Every time we had a big leg, for the most part, we made a lower high except for right here. And other than that, we're making lower highs and lower lowers as these legs come down. And there's several measured legs. There's two down. We ended up pushing a little further, and then you got two up. We actually overshot that some. Then you got almost two perfect measured legs down at the end of the day. And so I think that's your break and two measured legs down. We'll see what happens from here when the market opens back up here. So anyway, that's how I saw it. I'm going to back out here. We'll go through the trades. Mostly all shorts today. You need to be real careful buying this thing. I say that, then ironically, the only buy I've got is right into what is a possible trend line up here. But really, I had this lower, and it probably still is lower. I adjusted it because it seems to fit here better. But originally, I had it right off those two closes, and that had this outside that trend line looking to go a little higher. And actually, I originally had this a little higher and showed this looked like an overshoot, and that could still be the case. Let me just show you how I had it, just so you can see what I'm talking about. That's how I originally had it, like so. And it does tend to fit real well on the midline there as well. And you can see though, we got that close outside, then went higher, and then we come back. And it does tend to come back into play here. So I may have had it right the first time. I adjusted it and played with it and ended up leaving it the way you originally saw it. But this still feels a little, still looks like it fits a little better because it does fit the midline much better here, especially early on in the day. So we'll leave it like that. But again, you can see the big blue range versus the tan channel working lower. And I think they're both, I mean, you can see the midline on the range coming into play in here too. So I think they're both valid. Both of them helped you to some degree. Maybe the tan one didn't as much until later here. That if you played the tan one, it might have motivated you to take a couple of more shorts in here that I didn't mark. You could have taken this one anyway without the channel. But let's back out where we can see this a little better and go through the trades. And 7 o'clock comes right along in this little tight congestion here. And there's a couple of different ways to play this. It looks like it's going to be a failed second entry short, but look how those bars are all stacked up. This one has no body or a very tiny body. That's congestion. And so it's going to probably act like a range, and that's exactly what happens. It fails out the top, it breaks out the top and fails. If you got enough room to go short before these lows, probably want to take that trade. I marked it green because it is off the EMA, but we just came off of the lower side here. However, you may not have had that in play yet. You might have still been looking at something like this. And this is correct too. It's probably just a little steeper. Then we went into the flatter one. This one's a little too steep. And if you look at this original one, that's the first break. So you would still expect a retest of the lows, and that's what we got there. So on the failed breakout, I like that. You're not really looking for it to come down like this. If it does, that's great. There's actually a lower high right here. I didn't mark yet because this bar is just so there's so much stem, and it looks like there's some support here. And so I was a little leery of this one because we already have the break in the new low right here. You don't know that you're going to get that next push down. If you took that trade, I probably wouldn't be too upset with you if you took that trade. It's a possibility. It's a little aggressive, but the first one's aggressive too. So, and then we bounce and we're just going, don't enter in this stuff. And of course you get this big bullish or bearish bar, but you don't want to enter there. And you get a lower high here, but it's very doubtful you're going to have this midline here yet. And you know, if you look at this bigger channel, this channel versus, let's just get rid of this one now so we don't get confused, but you got the blue channel here, and you look like you got a close outside here. It's not very convincing though. So, but I just don't, that's really your signal bar, and you really can't use that for a signal bar. It's big and bearish, but you don't want to go short way down here, and it's not really your signal bar anyway, so it doesn't qualify. You get a lower high here, but again, it's looking congested. It would have worked, and it is very bearish, but there's not much room to the lows. And if you're just patient, it comes back again right off that trend line, and now you could look at that. That's a true failed second entry long. Yeah, it moved a good bit there, but we never have gotten back down to the lows. And a bar that bearish after two legs down, and this thing doesn't rally out of here, it's probably going lower, and you can see the bottom drops out of that one. You got an easy runner there. It's probably the trade of the morning if you didn't catch this one here. And of course we bounce here, and you do get a couple of legs up on this one as well. You get much more than a measured move up, but anyway, you can see we went a little bit higher here, but there's a clear double bottom here with a first entry and then a second entry. I didn't mark this one because that trend channel right there is still in play, and it's very dangerous to go short right there because that would have just gotten you this trend line, and you don't know that at this point this looks like a range day. And yeah, we're way away from the EMA, but this trend channel is still in play, this micro channel. If this would have broke higher, I'd have said maybe go short right there. And then by the time you get your failure, you're above the EMA and you don't have much room back to it, so you can't really take. If this was way away from the EMA, I'd say take that failure. But it doesn't set up that way. And technically, you could argue for this to be your failure right here because it's first entry, second entry, and that is through the EMA. I didn't mark this one, but this is another one you could take. It's a little aggressive in my opinion because this was a really strong move up, and that's your first break, and we don't have a new, we haven't retested that high yet, so there's a chance it could retest. Of course, now that we know the tan channel's there, we understand why it didn't, but at this point you didn't know that necessarily. So that turns out to be a great move down. But the problem is you got all this support here. So you need a really good entry. You actually got to have a second entry short here, but if you have enough room here, you might take that trade. But I was really afraid of this trade. I'll just be honest with you because we were coming up out of here. I was afraid it was going to break lower and turn back up again. But it turns out to be a great trade. Looking at it hindsight, yeah, that might have been worth risking. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect setup because this is congestion, and you can clearly see that strong support. So you just got to be real careful. The key is, do you have room to get out here before reaching these lows? If you do, maybe you take that trade. If not, I'd stay away from it. I wanted to take it, I'll be honest with you, but I did not. So it's just there's better trades than that. And even though it turns out to be a great move, most of the time it's going to bounce there, even if it's going lower. And there's just too big a chance to get stopped out on it. So because you got this little short-term channel and you got a break and a new low, so we could get a bigger correction there, but turns out to be one of the better trades of the day. You can't go short down here. It's way too far away from the EMA. You do get your close outside new low, and then you rally up here. And I didn't draw the little trend channel here, but there is one right there. And you close outside. You tried to go higher, and of course you can see that trend line. That trend line's obvious and very well confirmed multiple times. And that's a second entry short. Go short right there. It actually comes back and gives you another opportunity with a failed second entry long. It's starting to look a little congestive, but with that trend line, I liked that trade. And you can see it drops on down. Finally get a break here. And when you do, you get a second entry short off of it. First entry, second entry. There's your new low. First entry, and then you try to go higher again, second entry. And now you got this midline in here that looks very, very good. And we haven't got to what looks like the low side. Of course, you may not have had that low side yet because we hadn't made the low down here. So you have to have some experience and know how to find these midlines to try to pre-guess where this is going to be. So you need to be a little bit more advanced for that. But anyway, second entry short there, and then you got a new swing high here. First entry, second entry, it fails. The only reason I didn't like this one is because it's near the lows. We're still making lower lows each time, but we bounced right in here so many times it makes that a little aggressive. It works, but you see how quickly it bounces, and then you would have got stopped out. But luckily, it actually goes higher and turns down. You know, if you know what you're doing and you're a pretty good chart reader, you probably go short one tick below that. to make sure you got a little more room there. If you wait till here, you definitely don't have enough room to get out, which makes it much more aggressive. And it is a engulfing bar, so that makes it aggressive too. So that's why it's green. It's not a high probability trade that most traders should be taking. The only good thing about this is with the trend, and you're looking for more downward action here. But it bounces, gives you another second entry there, but not a very good signal bar. Gives you a lower high here. Again, not a good enough signal bar. And it continues to work on down, and it kind of bounces down here. And you get another second entry. It's actually right here, but you can see this is why we use these signal bars for filters. Notice the new low, first entry, second entry right there, and it fails, instantly stops you out, and then goes exactly where you think it's going to go. So I wouldn't look at that as a failure. That was tempting because I remember looking at that and saying, hey, this could be a reversal here. But it's just not. It's actually two quick legs up that are almost measured legs, and so it makes it, even though we don't quite have a measured leg, there's not much to play with there. So that was a little. I just had that. Sometimes you get that gut feeling that, hey, even though it's looking like a reversal, what you really want to see is for it to shoot right on through the EMA, turn down, pull back, and then pull back again. But you want to see a burst there somewhere that shows a burst of buying. And even though we've got some buying there, it just looks like a correction. This looks much more bullish, and this looks much more bullish than any of this does. So, and then here's where it starts to look, boom. And you can see that's what you want to see. And unfortunately, you don't want to be buying right there, and by the time it gets here, you'd be chasing it, and you don't want to chase that trade. So unfortunately, just no way to enter that. Then you start working back down, and you just end up going sideways. This is a little failed break lower, but that's your signal bar, and it's not good enough. This was tempting. This didn't break lower. I still like this to go higher, but it didn't break lower. So if you those little two matching lows and this closing on it's very high, if you took that trade, that clearly looks like we're going to get another leg up similar to this one. And you can see we start this leg right here, and we actually get a little more than a measured leg there. So I liked this one to the upside. I'm not going to mark it. You need to be very skilled to take a trade like that. If I mark a trade like that next week, somebody's over, Mac marked one just like this on his chart. Why'd mine fail? So I'm not going to mark that that trade on this chart. Then we're just working sideways. We got a little overbought here, but we come back here. There's actually a new high here with a first entry, second entry, and then there's a first entry, second entry short. So the failure's technically right there, but notice how we don't break higher till here, so I didn't count it till here. And I like this one just because it broke lower and turned and closed so bullish. Right off the EMA, right off the midline. And the fact that we couldn't even back up and correct very much, we're just going sideways. This thing still got some bullish slant to it right here, and we could be reversing out of here. So I liked going long right there. That was another quick, easy move that gave you a runner. Then we run up, and then it finally runs out of steam. There's actually a second entry here. I forgot to mark this, but this one, I like this trade too because you got all this support all the way across here. And this is clearly a first entry, second entry. I just forgot to mark it. And it's good for a easy scout, but you don't get much more, and it just starts going sideways. I actually marked this as a failure because notice your first entry, second entry, and I really thought this would take off, and when it didn't, you get a first entry and a second entry short, but it's also a failed second entry long. It's definitely congested, but it's right off that key entry point, and it is a second entry short. And this is the first break of that tan channel, which you would expect this to probably reverse at some time and try to make a new low. So I like that one. You got to be careful with these. I'll be honest with you. When you start to see that congestion, but if you understand why the congestion is, the key is there's a lot of buying coming in here because you're back to this trend line. And it was also a second entry. However, they can't take it higher and back through that EMA. And so that's why you get the congestion. And so one of these is going to win out. And when you see a second entry short and a failed second entry long, the odds are on your side to go short. And so that's why I like that one. You could probably argue for it to be green. In fact, we'll just make it green. It drops on down, and you make a new low there, first entry. And this is a convoluted second entry, again, right at the key entry point. But notice how you break lower, and then it turns and goes higher, and then comes back down. So technically, that's a second entry short right there. I don't think I would have entered below this bar, but I liked entering this on an engulfing bar, but you want to make sure you got room to get out. So what you might do is let this break lower, drop a limit order in a little higher, and it gives you a little extra room. Again, this is another one that you need to be careful with, but there's a new high here, first entry. It's a failure and a second entry all in one again. So I like that. It's almost a repeat pattern of this right here, and that's why I really like. I really thought you could get more out of that one, but it gets a few extra ticks. It's an easy scalp. So, and then it comes back again and gives you this huge bearish bar. And as big as that bar is, I'm not crazy about that bar because it's so big, but it's so bearish that it's probably going to start the downtrend back again. What you might do is let it break lower and drop a limit order, and you can see it backed up quite a bit here. So I don't know how far exactly you could have got filled, but you could have taken some of the risk out of that huge bar. It's like 19 ticks, so you probably could have taken, 5 or 6 ticks out of the risk of that and got this nice move back down. And you're still looking for prices to go make a new low, so you got a lot of room left to the downside. The key is you don't know how it's going to get there. Of course, that is the first break of this trend channel, and you still got a little bit of room left here, especially if you use a limit order there. And it drops on down. We're just kind of working sideways. You could look at this as a failed breakout, but I'd probably want to wait. This is technically your signal bar is the green one, so you really can't take that trade. So you'd want to wait on a lower high, and you just don't get one. And it comes back, and finally you get a lower high right here and a big bearish bar. That's the place to go short. And the bottom drops. You could call that a failure, but it's not back to the trend line, or I'm sorry, not back to the EMA. There is a trend line here, and it is off the trend line, but it's not back to the EMA, and so I just don't like that one. And you can see it's not long till we have the new, or actually bounce. We don't have a new low in place yet, but we bounce here. And I don't see any good chance to get long here. This looked like it was going to set up for a long, but it doesn't. And your break is above this inside bar. I still like that trade because if it breaks higher here, notice there's a new, that's basically a double bottom there. So a first entry, second entry, and as bearish as that is when it climbs and breaks above it, it backs up momentarily, but you figure if it gets above that, it's going to take off, and sure enough, it did. But anyway, I just don't think you can take that trade. It's one of those gut feels that prices are going higher, and you'll probably be right when they do, but it doesn't set up well enough to risk it. So, and right in here, it's really hard to know what prices are doing. it takes off so bullishly, then it comes back and gets you a break, and then it doesn't quite make a new high, and then it gives you a second entry here, but it's an engulfing bar. And if you went long there, you got stopped out, and then it turns and goes right back, and the failed second entry, and the failure to the long side fails, the failure to the short side fails, and it's just really hard then to know what's going on. I'll mark this one because it's almost a repeat of this, and it does work out pretty close. It goes higher, so that was the only reason I marked that one. It's a second entry long. It's a failed second entry short, and it just looks like almost a repeat pattern of what you saw over here with that engulfing bar and all. So on a second entry long, so that's why I marked that one. But it's still aggressive, and I think you're better. It's just hard to know what prices are doing in here, and you can see it's not long before they're racing lower again. Because you get this break, a couple legs up, and then you make a lower high, and then, but actually this is a higher high than this, but it's a lower high. It's a double top overall, and then you make the lower high, which is tempting to go short there, but I still think it's too early. But then it pushes through the MA and pulls back and gives you that failed second entry long and this huge bearish bar that at one time was very, very bullish. That's the place to go short, and you can see the bottom falls out of it. If you catch that one, you can ride that all the way down because it never really rallies out of there. Every time it hits that trend line, it rockets off again. Unfortunately, I don't see any more entries that are worth taking here going into 2 o'clock or the 3 o'clock hour. So I think that pretty much does it for today. So it got a little dicey in here, and this rally was a little hard to get a good read on, especially with the downtrend channel possibly being in play. Usually you'd be looking to get short up here, but you never really get a good chance to. It's just too sideways, and then you get a short trap and it rockets up. And so when you see a big rally like this, be very careful about looking for shorts, because it takes a little bit, and that's what happens. It takes a little bit for this momentum to wane, and then boom, it takes off. Same thing here. It took a little while for the momentum to wane, and then it sells off. When we made this higher low here, a lot of people were probably looking for prices to go higher. I mean, you had to be on the lookout for a possible leg like this and then another one like this, but you can see we came up way short, and when that happens, it generally leads to a bigger sell-off in the other direction because it's fooling all these people and it's not meeting that target, and there's probably a lot of people shooting for that target that are getting long in here thinking we still got a lot of room left, and then suddenly they realize they're on the wrong side and they have to all exit and the bottom just falls out. So keep that in mind for future. This is 30 minutes worth. This was kind of a there's a lot of trades here today, but a lot of this is still not an easy day to trade, just like yesterday wasn't, because you get these big bursts in both directions. The market gets very nervous on these big sell-offs like this, and you will get these huge corrections like this. And so I'm expecting at any time this thing's going to burst out of here and start trending straight up. Even if we're going to go lower, we're going to get a day here before long that rallies like crazy. And when it does, take advantage of it. Buy like crazy and try to get a runner and hang on, because it will. We're going to get one of those days. It's coming. Even if it's only for a day or half a day. I mean, even today we had some moments like that, but just like yesterday, you see we had that. I mean, there's two huge legs up there. See how close those are to being perfect measured legs. You can see that it's almost two perfect measured legs up. So, and then a lot of times that can be the center of the pattern. So we might push back down again, although I think we've already had our two legs down. Now we had two legs up. Could we get another leg like this big leg? It's possible. So, but if we bounce early here, we'll probably make another measured leg up, possibly like that one. That's what I'm expecting at some point, maybe. Is it coming tomorrow? I don't know. We'll just have to see. But I'm going to wrap this up. We're getting 30 minutes here, and it's getting late. So I'm going to wrap it up. I hope you had a good trading day. Be careful on these days, especially these more side. Even though there's a big downward bias here, this is a kind of a sideways day, and you can get, especially if you get caught trying to get short at near the reversals or long near the reversals, it'll hurt you quickly. So you have to just take a hit and move on. So don't try to hold on through these pullbacks and stuff, which is what most people do. They'll do that and they'll get away with it a few times, and then they'll try it, and one day it doesn't work and it doesn't come back and it blows their account out. That's what happens to a lot of people, especially traders that are starting to trade pretty well. They lose that little bit of discipline and it comes back to haunt them. So don't lose your discipline. If you're wrong, take your hit and move on, and just be careful when it starts to get like this at these, at these certain areas, like in here. We still had the channel working for us here, the blue channel, and coming up here, you're all in this upper point. Be real careful getting long in here. Make sure you get a trap like here, something really good. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.